Morning. Our devotional time today will be spent here in Nehemiah chapter 6. The work of rebuilding and restoration was in full swing. The external attempts of Sanballat and Tobiah to prevent the work through fear and intimidation way back in chapter 4 had completely failed. By the grace of God, Nehemiah had helped the people to stay focused during the fight, and they continued the work with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. Now, as the work nears completion here in chapter 6, we see the enemy resort to one of his most effective tactics when the direct physical assault fails. When it doesn't achieve the desired results, he turns his attention to the mental and the emotional realm and launches the next attack from that angle. And more often than not, it is much more effective. And that's exactly where we find ourselves here in our devotional text in Nehemiah chapter 6 today. And thankfully, in this chapter, Nehemiah shows us what to do or how to react when hell tries to get in your head. It sound familiar today? There are at least 4 internal tactics employed by our enemy in this chapter. But no matter the angle, the objective was always the same. Stop the work of God. Hinder the progress. We need to remember that today. His purpose is to slow the work if he can't stop it, to hinder it, to distract from it. And you and I are just collateral damage. It's not about us. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like so often I've asked, why? Why all this, Lord? Or what am I doing to merit this kind of attention? I'm just not this important. And we're not. But the work we're doing is, and our enemy is bent on stopping that work. So let's just dive into the text and see how, first of all, the enemy tries to get in our heads through what I'm calling a distracting invitation. Now, it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian and the rest of our enemies heard that I had builded the wall and that there was no breach left therein. The word about the wall always gets out. And when word gets out, the enemy turns out. That Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, Come, let us meet together in some one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief. There's a whole sermon in that one verse. It was a call for compromise, and it's still being sounded today. Let's find some middle ground where we can get together and talk about this. Let's find a middle ground, something we can agree on. But have you noticed that in compromise, it's always about us coming down and it's never about them coming up? Verse 3, I sent messengers unto them saying, I am doing a great work. I want to remind you today, you're doing a great work. I may not be a great man, but I'm doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease whilst I leave it and come down to you? Nehemiah saw through the deception, and he realized that it was nothing more than a distraction. And while he was out waging a war he could never win, the work and the wall, the progress would cease. And yet they sent unto me 4 times after this manner, and I answered them after this sword, and I answered them after the same manner. The devil is persistent, so we have to be consistent with our answers. Then, when the distracting invitation doesn't work, the enemies move forward with a deceptive insinuation. Look at verse 5. Then sent Sanballat his servant unto me in like manner the 5th time with an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, It is reported among the heathen, and Gashmu saith it, that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king according to these words. Wow. Their motives were being totally misrepresented. In verse 7, he goes on to say, you've appointed priests, and you're gonna be a king. And then he says, and now shall it be reported to the king according to these words. I'm going to tell the king. The enemy is questioning the purity of our motives. And the attack keeps getting more and more and more personal. Verse 8, then I sent unto him, saying, there are no such things done as thou sayest, but thou feignest them out of thine own heart. You are making this up. You know it's not real. What a great response. But read verse 9. Boy, it spoke to me yesterday. It hit home in my heart. For they all made us afraid, saying, their hands shall be weakened from the work, that it be not done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. It was getting to him more than he wanted to let the enemy know. See, when hell gets in your head, when hell starts insinuating that your motives aren't pure, there comes a point where we start believing it ourselves. We start questioning our own motives. Am I doing this for the right reason? Is my heart really pure? And again, the result is the same. The work is disrupted. It takes away our focus from what we're supposed to be doing. Then when Sanballat and Tobiah noticed that this wasn't working, they left the invitation and the insinuation to return to direct intimidation. Watch verse 10. Afterward, I came into the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Metabiel, who was shut up, and he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. That's plausible. And let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee. Yea, in the night will they come to slay thee. That's how hell works when it gets in your head. It plants the seed of fear. And then our minds create the crisis. And then once our minds have got us all in a turmoil, then the enemy steps forward with what seems to be a very plausible suggestion. Let's hide. Let's go to the church. Let's go to the temple. I mean, it's always right to go to the house of the Lord, right? It's the right place. But this wasn't the right purpose. And it certainly wasn't the right time. So Nehemiah said, verse 11, should such a man as I flee? What's it going to look like if I flee in fear? What are these people going to do if they see me run and hide? I will not go in. If I go to the temple to save my life, what's it going to do to the work? Nehemiah realized that at this point, going in would have had the same result as coming down. It would have stopped the work on the wall. I will go to the temple, but I'll go on my time and I'll go under my terms. I'll go there to worship. And lo, I perceived in verse 12 that God had not sent him, but that he had pronounced this prophecy against me, for Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Therefore was he hired, that I should be afraid and do so and sin, that they might have matter an evil report, that they might reproach me. He wasn't heaven's herald. He was hell's hireling. Be careful who you're listening to right now. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. And lastly, when the work cannot be stopped by invitation or insinuation or even intimidation, the enemy works to do it through a disturbing infiltration. Verse 15, the wall's finished. The job is done. But the enemy's not done. Even though in verse 16 it says that when all of our enemies heard thereof, all the heathen that were about us, when they saw these things, they were much cast down in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was wrought of our God. But they're still not done. Moreover, in those days, verse 17, the nobles of Judah sent many letters unto Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came to them. There's a connection there that they couldn't break. Verse 19, and also they reported his good deeds before me and uttered my words to him. And Tobiah sent letters to put me in fear. There are some things that are going to follow us inside the walls. We cannot get distracted when everybody's not on the same team and everybody doesn't have the same purpose. We've got to stay focused. What good are rebuilt walls if we never restore the worship and if the city never starts to function again? There is a purpose and there is a plan. And even when hell gets in our head on the inside of the wall, we've got to stay focused on the work of God. Thank you, Nehemiah, for showing us what to do when hell gets in our heads. God bless you today.